So, as is common with Trump's very pragmatic and erratic sort of governing, if you even want to call it that, I, of course, wanted to today talk about his appeasement, one of them being a Russian appeasement. And now, just a few hours ago, he said he's going to put tariffs and sanctions on Russia. So yeah, I can never even like I'm always wrong because of how often Trump changes his mind. But there's a few other I think areas where Trump's appeasement in the last few days is really showing its ugly head. So I definitely wanna cover that. But I should mention, since that is the fact, that he does is now threatening with tariffs and sanctions for Russia. Joining me today is Anders. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Anders, I'll go to you just for a comment on that. I mean, what do you make of this? You know, Trump has called Zelensky a dictator, then wanted a deal, then stopped aid from going into Ukraine, refused to call Putin a dictator, wanting to basically give Putin a bunch of Ukraine, and now calling for sanctions. I mean, what do you make of this
Well,
sort of
it
policy?
just shows that the lack of a principled foreign policy, right? He's priding himself of being the great deal maker, and I think this is how he operates. And I don't know that we should expect anything different going forward. What will come out at the end, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, so let's go to the first part where I think Trump is really the sort of appeasement first is, I think, the proper way to sort of call Trump's policy. He calls himself a sort of a peacemaker. He calls himself, the president of peace. But it's important to remember that sort of peace or inaction in the face of evil, in the face of dictatorship, is no sort of virtue. You are simply surrendering to those dictatorships. Now, the first thing that is coming out, just with for some context, basically Trump, in many ways, has promised hell to Hamas, has promised hell. But I believe that maybe the day he was elected, or maybe a few before, that if hostages are not released by January 20th, when he was inaugurated, there's going to be all hell will break loose, or whatever sort of language he used. That didn't happen. Instead, he forced the his special envoy to Middle East, Steve Witkoff, has forced Netanyahu into taking a deal. Now, of course, the blame is, of course, also on Netanyahu too. He was the one who allowed himself to be influenced. But the fact is, Trump pressured Netanyahu into taking the ceasefire deal. Now the ceasefire deal has run off. Israel has put basically has stopped aid from going in, and is possibly discussing even going. IDF is preparing and possibly getting ready to go back into Gaza. Now, Trump, in the recent Truth on his Truth Social, has said, "Shalom Hamas means hello and goodbye. You can choose. Release all the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over for you. Only sick and twisted people keep bodies, and you are sick and twisted. I'm sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job. Not a single Hamas member will be safe if you don't do as I say. I have just met with your former hostages whose lives you have destroyed. This is your last warning for the leadership. Now is the time to leave Gaza while you still have the chance. Also, to the people of Gaza, a beautiful future awaits, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead. Make a smart decision," now in our caps lock. "Release the hostages now, or there will be hell to pay later." Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. But as we've seen in some recent posts or some reports on Friday overnight, so from Thursday to Friday, it sounds like U.S. has proposed a ceasefire deal to Hamas. And basically has apparently Donald Trump has been in secret talks with Hamas, sort of bypassing even Israel. Um, I mean, Anders, we had a choice during the election between what was sort of, we either gonna get Kamala, who would probably be decent on Ukraine, but really bad on Israel, or Trump was going to be good on Israel or good on Middle East supposedly and bad on Ukraine. We got the bad on Ukraine really toughly, but is this the good on Israel that we were supposed to get or we were expecting?
I think it's far too early to say. For all his blustering, we're still waiting for him to walk the talk, right? And I mean, I would certainly welcome him unleashing Israel on Gaza. And I mean, my view for on the region as such is that number one, we have to take out Iran, and he has mentioned that as well. But he's also obviously want to negotiate with Iran. But that's number one. Taking out Iran, their nuclear facilities, and probably their oil producing capacity as well would send a very good message to the other cronies around the world, Putin, and to China and North Korea, that actually there are in certain situations that we're serious about this. I doubt that it will happen, just like I doubt that it will happen in Gaza. We'll yeah, we'll see. I mean, my personal opinion about Israel and its immediate neighborhood is that Israel just has to occupy Gaza, has to occupy the West Bank, southern Lebanon, possibly southern Syria, and just rule it for the duration. I know Israelis don't want to do that, but given how the region is composed and such, I don't see any long term. It's kind of it's a generational project where you would gradually grant the people in those areas, the Palestinians, more and more rights as they start to become civilized, if you like, and kind of pursue a productive life and give up on their hopes of pushing Israel into the sea.
Yeah, and that is sort of the biggest problem when it comes to the current, well, not even necessarily the current administration, but the current state of affairs in America. The fact that it truly does seem, and now I can imagine there were times where America was probably more divided than it is right now. After all, there was a civil war. But it really does seem we haven't seen the sort of division between the Republicans and Democrats as we've seen in the past. And the fact that with something like Gaza, yeah, that is not whatever Trump does. Is not gonna stand unless there is some agreement by both sides, unless there is some recognition that the other next administration is gonna follow the similar path. Now, the plan we had from Trump was that Gaza would become part of the United States, that it would be some territory of the United States or something in that regard. Now, this, as with many of Trump's ideas, seems to no longer really matter. I don't see anybody really talking about it. Even now, with this sort of deal, apparently, if Hamas releases the hostages, the US will actually push for permanent end to the war. If Hamas refuses, Trump is prepared to greenlight Israel's military campaign against the terror group in Gaza. Um, Now, that simply is not good enough. Even if we release the hostages, Israel still needs to go to Gaza. Hamas cannot, at the very least, and even that's not enough. Hamas cannot stay in Gaza. But even then, some control by some Western entity has to take control of Gaza. We cannot have Egypt take it. We cannot have Palestinian Authority take it. We cannot have some form of international coalition or whatever take it. We've tried all of that, and all of that has failed in the past. It needs to be, and I'm not calling for United States to sort of annex it. I don't think that's their problem to sort of work this out. It's on Israel to do this. And Israel needs to realize that only occupation and plan for annexation, plan for some plan for de-radicalization and civilization for Gaza is the only real way forward. Now, Anders, what do you think happened with the plan to make Gaza some part of America, or to basically, I mean, the one thing was to get some Palestinians out of Gaza, and then do something. Some people might have seen the AI generated video Trump posted on his social media with like Trump Gaza or something like that. But yeah, what do you think? Where do you think Trump stands now? It really does seem
Yeah,
like
I agree with you that the only realistic solution is for realistic lasting solution, I said, is for Israel to occupy the territory, and the U.S. should stay out. For I mean, this is Trump, in my view, Trump, the real estate developers, and he seems to want to add. Well, one day he seems to want to add more real estate to America, whether that be Greenland or the Panama Canal or Gaza for that matter. And then the next day he say, yeah, no, we should stay out of everything. We shouldn't get involved and things like that. So it's really hard to see. I've seen some articles arguing that he's looking at the world in like as basically three different power spheres. So the Americas, that's for the US to take care of, and the Americas. I mean, if you look on a map, Greenland is kind of part of the Americas. Uh, but and then it's Russia in Europe, and well, who knows? Probably Africa, and then China for East Asia and such. Uh, I don't know if that is truly how he's thinking. I think it's, I mean, it's really hard to read the man, and quite frankly, there is only so much value in doing it because tomorrow it's something else. So trying to think too hard about what he is thinking, what are his principles. The only principle I think is that there really are no principles, and you give him too much credit by obsessing too much about it.
yeah, he reminds me of when I was in my primary school and I was choosing my high school. We went to visit all the high schools in the area, and I had a large recency bias where every high school, the last high school we visited, I'm like, oh, that's the one I want to go to, and
Yeah.
it really does feel like Trump has something like that. Like even when it comes to sort of him doing the truth on his Truth Social about Gaza, he mentioned the the hostages he met with. There were some of the hostages. I think no, Argamani was among them that visited the White House to talk to President Trump, and it really does seem like that sort of influenced him into this decision. Now,
No, I
as you
think
said,
I think you're absolutely right there with the recency bias. He has been there, and probably in earnest, emotionally, he felt terrible for those people and for the remaining hostages, and then he lashes out on Truth Social. But then that fades away pretty quickly, and then there is something else that comes to the forefront. So
yeah, and maybe he recently, because you mentioned the three spheres of influence, maybe he recently read 1984 and he was like, oh, this three, Eurasia and Oceania, I kind of like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Maybe we can make that happen. Because yeah, it's really hard to make sense of many of his actions, to make sense of, especially because it's not even sort of like consistent evil. It's like I said today. He's saying he would put. Someone says I'm too quiet, so I'll try to be closer. Someone, yeah, not like we had him becoming like increasingly pro-Russian. You couldn't even say anything else, and now he's threatening with tariffs and possible sanctions for Russia. So again, it's not even that. Like I always say, with Biden, we knew where he stood. It's all gonna be sort of pretty bad, but we can understand where it's gonna go. We can understand how bad it's gonna be. But Trump, it really does seem like recently, Ayn Rand Institute has posted has posted a video where they talked about the last week's meeting with President Zelensky, President Trump, and Vice President JD Vance. And someone in the chat has said this aged badly, and they published this like a few hours ago. And someone in the chat says this aged badly. Trump just said he's gonna put sanctions on Russia, and it's like I cannot like, and we have a sort of similar problem here on the Ayn Rand Center UK. Like we cannot plan shows ahead of time if he's gonna like change his policy from one day to the other. Like you need to give us some time so news can actually like comment on the stuff without like even last week, the we had to like do live sort of listening to the Oval Office because of how crazy stuff was happening. I mean, Anders, is this because I've seen that sort of thing in my own country where our prime minister has clear authoritarian goals, and so what he does is he puts up so much different things are happening at the same time that you sometimes don't notice the really bad stuff that's happening, and it makes you sort of you don't really see a lot of stuff that's happening because there's only one sort of news story that is the number one story at one time.
Yeah,
So
no, I think that that is a strategy of authoritarians to kind of overwhelm the people, so you don't have time or the energy to react. You kind of become exhausted, right? But I don't even know if we can ascribe that to Trump. I don't know if he's smart enough to have a strategy in that way. Maybe some people in his administration does. I don't know. But yeah, he's just consistently inconsistent. And except for on tariffs, it seems, which is, the worst, one of the worst part of his agenda. But yeah, I mean, I think it's something you have to just roll with the punches, I guess, and make the best of it. I mean, we obviously we shouldn't give up. We shouldn't throw up our hands because we have to continue. And I think what the important part is to bring it back to and keep repeating the fundamental principles here, because there are other people out there that are listening. So, for instance, when it comes to foreign policy, we have to ask ourselves what is truly in the self-interest of, and then for us here in the US, what is truly in the self-interest of individual Americans, right? And when it comes to involvement, I mean, when we're talking NATO and we're talking Europe, and I mean, I can certainly have a discussion about the validity of, I mean, definitely the UN, but possibly NATO as well, because it's should Turkey be in a military alliance like NATO? I would much rather long term, looking at kind of thinking about a vision here, is that the US would form military alliances with countries who shared our funding principles here, our that all men are created equal and that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and put themselves on a path to realizing that. Now, we're obviously very, very far away from that. But I think in times like this, it is more important than ever to articulate and voice those fundamental principles, and so that we don't lose touch and don't get too much wrapped up in the daily swirl from the White House and the administration. And I think, I mean, this is where Ayn Rand is an incredible help, because she has obviously pretty much covered the ground in all of these areas. So if you're in doubt about the tariffs, for instance, I mean, go to Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. I think that's where it is. And you can read about it, and it's pretty much tells the story. And for pretty much every other subject that we're dealing with here, foreign policy, US involvement in other countries and such, Ayn Rand has an answer. So, that is what we have to focus on, I think, in times like this.
yeah, and so something that also happened recently with Trump. He basically is sort of going on a crusade against NATO. He went on a speech about how when did NATO ever help us? Well, what is, we are sort of, we by meaning America is sort of like subsidizing it. Now, funnily enough, Article 5 of NATO, which talks about the collective defense of NATO, was only triggered once after 9/11. America was the only country that was ever defended by NATO, and every single country of NATO has joined, and many NATO soldiers have died in the wars that I think America. Many of the wars that fought after 9/11 were fought wrongly, but still the case is that all nations and even a few nations joined NATO after this happened and still provided support to America with the wars it was fighting. So even if you, I think that is a good case for NATO. Now again, we might have a problem, specific problems with countries not fulfilling their obligations, which I think is absolutely right. But the big part of that is that America has sort of acquired the leader of the free world, which meant pretty much all weapons are produced in America, and that's the way it happens. If you want the sort of self-sustaining Europe, it would mean that weapons would have to be made in Europe. Now, I think Europe and United States have a coefficient, have a beneficial relationship that should be kept and shouldn't be destroyed, or at least shouldn't be destroyed in one term. If there is a real case for America shouldn't be part of NATO and it should be sort of like a European alliance, then that's a decades thing that should happen, not something from one day to the other because one guy thinks it's done.
No, absolutely right. And I think that's one part of what we're seeing too now, that you know, there is not an organized retreat, if that's what you want to see. But so and there is not an agenda laid out where you say, okay, so in the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years, this is, I mean, you articulate a goal, and then you kind of put into place actions that takes you towards that goal, and we don't see any of that really.
Now, someone in the chat said a really good thing that I wanted to read out, but now I cannot find it. Oh, here it is. Someone says, imagine how things would be if Obama won again, Kamala as proxy. So let's go to policy that Obama has famously sort of pursued, and it's the nuclear deal with Iran or an appeasement with Iran. Now, Donald Trump is pretty much following the same path now I don't remember if this was when he was if this was when he was elected or when he was inaugurated, but he said he wants to pursue he prefers a peaceful path with Iran, meaning some sort of nuclear deal, and now has written a letter to Ayatollah Khomeini, basically saying the same thing. Basically, trying to say again that hey, let's pursue a deal. Let's make a nuclear deal, and we can avoid the sort of military conflict. I think the specific quote is I've written them a letter saying I hope you're going to negotiate because if we have to go in militarily, it's going to be a terrible thing. You can't let them have nuclear weapon. Now, we've seen a nuclear deal in the past. It didn't do anything. Iran continued to enrich its uranium and continued on a path towards a nuclear weapon. Now, Trump is calling for another deal. Now, you could say that, well, Trump is gonna, Trump is no appeaser like Obama. He's gonna make a better deal. But the fact is, there is no deal you can make with a dictatorship. We've tried the same thing. We pursued the similar diplomatic act with North Korea, and then they developed a nuclear weapon, and then Trump is friends with them. So, I mean, would he even mind if Iran really did develop nuclear weapon? I mean, Anders, what do you make? What do you make of his Iran
Yeah.
policy?
So I think there is a fine line here between wanting peace and at peace. you know, Trump the peacemaker or Trump the appeasemaker. And I mean, I can just restate my own opinion, and that is that you don't make deals with Iran. You don't make deals, as you said, with a dictatorship like that. And Iran, in a way, is worse than what Russia is because uh, there is at least a mode of self-preservation in Vladimir Putin, I think.
Well,
While
even if not in Vladimir Putin, at the very least, the oligarchs or some
the
of the.
oligarchs, yeah, exactly. So while in Iran, in the theocracy, in the top of the theocracy, I mean, I think they would. Yeah, I don't know to what level that self-preservation exists there. Obviously, they have quieted down quite a bit after Israel's attack on them here a few months ago. But they're biding their time. You know, they will be back. But we have to take them out because that would then stop the supply lines to the proxies, to the Houthis, to Hezbollah, to Hamas, etc. And that would allow for Israel. And I don't know who will take care of the Houthis. Maybe the Saudi Arabians can do that, but at least for Israel to take out Hezbollah and Hamas once and for all. And then whatever other proxies there are in Syria and in the neighboring countries there. So yeah, there really, in my mind, is no alternative to that. Everything else will just post postpone the reckoning, if you like. There was a really good article that I read by Jonah Goldberg, who is an American commentator at the Dispatch. And the title of his article was "Peace in His Time," which is a play on word, obviously, but arguing that basically Trump is not concerned with what's happening beyond his 4 years in office. He just want to build his resume, and doesn't really care what happens afterwards. So I think there is definitely some truth to that.
Yeah, I mean, there is a certain thing about, I think I made this point on some show in the past that basically Trump should take a page from Zelensky's book, or at least from what Zelensky was sort of trying to do with his party, called Servant of the People, because named after the show Zelensky did. Because that's what politicians, that's what presidents should be. They are servants. They are supposed to serve the individuals in their own country. Those are our representatives. They are not our some sort of sovereigns. They are not some sort of rulers over us that we like elect a dictatorship for 4 years. They are supposed to do what is good for the individuals in that country. And the sort of and it reminds me again from the Zelensky in the Oval Office when he was telling, Russians took Crimea, then they continued fighting in the Donbass, continued supporting the militias, continued like fighting against us, broke ceasefire and again. And Trump, Trump's response was, well, that happened in 2014 and 2015. And it's like, but America did nothing. You're a president of America, and America did nothing. That's also your fault. You handle that responsibility. You handle the responsibility of the things that America has failed in the past, and you have to make restitutions for it. It doesn't matter if it was done by a Republican or by a Democrat, or if it was done by independent. It doesn't matter. It was done by America, and that's who you are supposed to represent. And I could see the similar thing, peace in my time or on his time, or how it
He's
was.
in his time, yeah.
Yeah, that yeah, sure, there was no new war during Trump's presidency, but there was war during Trump's presidency that in many cases he did nothing about because he didn't want to be seen as sort of escalator when it comes to war. But there were things that America should have done during Trump's presidency, during Obama's presidency, during Biden's presidency, and during now again Trump's presidency. Just because nothing happens and you sort of can claim, well, I nothing happened when I was in office, you still need to take care of it. This is what America should stand for, no matter who is in office. And the fact that it's pretty much all politics. It's all the way it looks like and what is popular and how can I be elected. The fact that we do not have anybody who sort of is willing to do unpopular things or is willing to do sort of things that are going to be tough. The fact that even when it comes to tariffs, the fact that Trump is lying about what's it gonna do to the American economy. I mean, compared it to even someone like Milei saying after he was elected, saying something along the lines of things are gonna be bad. That's what it is. You need to realize that things are going to be bad for some time now until they're going to be better, until we can fix that. And that's why Millet was able to hang on to his popularity and his approval ratings, even despite the fact that there was a rampant increase in poverty in Argentina, because that was the only way they could sort of get out of the hole they were in. But Trump couldn't do that. Trump couldn't say to Americans, things are going to be tough, or that is the thing we need to solve. Even when he was saying to the American farmers that things are going to be tough because of the tariffs, he didn't say, we'll pull through or something. He just said, good luck, because that's the only thing he can sort of
Mhm.
even
Mhm.
bring himself up to. Um, but with that, we are running out of time. So,
Mhm.
I mean, Anders, what else there is to say about sort of Trump's policy? I mean, it really there is nothing else to say, but sort of really policy on of appeasement. We so far he was supposed to be the tough guy. He was supposed to be the person who was gonna do something about Hamas, was gonna do something about Iran, and so far since his inauguration, I haven't seen a single time he sort of stood up to the evil. The only time he stood up is to Canada and calling Canada a 51st state, standing out to Zelensky for defending his country, uh, and basically standing up to the good guys, or the better guys at least.
Yeah, no, no, that's absolutely right. And it's yeah, I don't know if it's Trump the peacemaker, but again, just to wrap up here, I think, I mean, we just have to accept that this is his modus operandus, and we have to, for all the actions that he's taking, we have to put it in the context of what it would look like in a rational society where we would like it to go, and using Ayn Rand's help with that, and because this too will come to an end, and good ideas will eventually triumph, even if it might seem hard to believe that at times.
Just quickly, someone says Canada is hardly any good. I mean, the line that is oftentimes used when it comes to history or geopolitics is compared to what? When we talk about the West, I think any Western nation is good by the standard of, at the very least, you can move out of that and you can go to any country you want. There is a freedom of movement. There is a even in many Western countries, there is a freedom of speech that you couldn't find in Russia, you couldn't find in Iran, you couldn't find in any of the more authoritarian, more dictatorship nations. Even though some people have problem with the way freedom of speech is handled in Western countries besides America. Trust me, it's still miles ahead of those other countries. So comparatively, the West is
Yeah.
good, and we
Yeah,
can
just
push for
ask
better.
just
But yeah.
yeah, just ask yourself, if you had the choice, would you rather live in Canada or in Russia? And if you say Russia, then you have some serious introspection to do.
Yeah, but even then, sort of like really comparatively, I think Western nations are still miles ahead and shouldn't be put in the same bag as Russia. I think we are still ahead of time. Uh, but with that, Anders, any last thoughts and where can people find you?
People can find me on Substack, andersingemarson.substack.com, and you can find my book, Think Right or Wrong, Not Left or Right, on an Amazon outlet near you.
And with that, thank you, Anders, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. There will be no reality show today, unfortunately, but we should be back tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective, as well as on Sunday, we should have the Razi Ginsburg and Moshe Feiglin debate. So people should get ready for that. It should be a bit longer, not just 30 minutes. So it's definitely gonna be a hell of a time. With that, thank you again, Anders. Thank you everybody for watching, and bye bye.
Thank you.